Mask off. 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 You've been tuned in to Mask Off, where conversation will rule the nation on face-to-face basis when we blast off. It's real on the asphalt, on the turf of the court. Yeah, we here for the sport, so take your mask off so I can hear your ass talk. Let me hear you explain. Hold the thoughts on your brain. Is your ass small? Spit facts and real talk. I need that shit from the street that make you think real deep and take a long walk. This podcast is hella lit with my man JD Fence and Skizzo Blizzo.
What it do, family? Welcome back to the house, man. Mask and Cover Podcast. Glad to be back in the house, man. J Defense, man. JAYDFENCE on all platforms. More importantly, Mask Uncovered. Mask Uncovered Podcast on all platforms. YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. Shout out to my man Skizzo. I know you down right now. You know, you'll get back to us, man. And, you know, prayers to you and healing real fast. But right now we got to get back to business, man. Another interview out here, man, and we got a special guest in the house. Let them know who we have in the house tonight.
Hey, I'm Danny McDonald. I'm a reporter for the Boston Globe. I cover City Hall for the Globe. I've been a working journalist for 18 years. Have reported from London, from Bermuda. Previously reported for a bunch of small community papers in Massachusetts. Yeah, that's me.
Okay, so we know what we got in the house. So first off the rip, okay, so you're a reporter for the Boston Globe. How do a person become a reporter for the Boston Globe? So backtracking, initially, let's go with the first question. At what age or stage did you feel that you wanted to be a journalist?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've always liked reading and writing, and I've always liked talking to people. And I didn't want to be an English major because I don't like Shakespeare. So journalism just seemed easier. And yeah, it's kind of, I think it's probably the only thing that I could do, to be honest with you. It's a tough industry. I mean, my entire adult life, basically, I'm 39 now. Since I was 21, I've been a journalist. So basically started out at very small community papers, kind of learning the craft. And journalism it's a type of thing you learn by doing. So just slowly kind of built up, went from small community paper to a slightly bigger community paper to a slightly bigger community paper. And then, the Globe was always the goal for me, being a guy from Massachusetts. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
I don't want to shortchange the small community papers. We'll get back to that in 2 seconds. But so, are you 5 years old and you're writing long narrative stories? Are you 10 years old and that's where you started feeling that you had a knack for writing? I would see your father read papers like that.
Yeah. I mean, I grew up with papers around. You know what I mean? And I always wanted to get paid to write. That was always the goal because I always thought that was cool, and I always thought I had a knack for writing. And there's not too many gigs where you can get paid to write.
As a teenager, and like in high school,
yeah. Like in middle school, I was just like, I was a book nerd, bookworm, and it just I was good at it. I thought. So yeah, just kind of, I guess, fell into it. It just made sense. Plus, journalism it's not like you're a copywriter, you know what I mean? It's a little bit more, there's a little bit more meat on the bone than a lot of writing jobs, I'd say. You're dealing with real people, real facts, real stories. So that's always been appealing to me, yeah.
So that perception was picked up early. So now you kind of glossed over, the small time papers, but everyone sees the success story. So they see that, okay, you made it to the NBA. Okay, so you made it to the Boston Globe.
Yeah.
I don't want to shortchange those small steps. I'll say those steps along the way. Excuse me for saying even small steps. But what were some of those papers that you wrote?
So my first job out of college was at the Gardner News in Gardner, Mass. Northern Worcester County. I covered City Hall for them. It's kind of a typical post-industrial New England town in that it used to be, there was a lot of manufacturing there. It was once the furniture capital of New England, but now it's not. And so there's like all these hulking, sort of like empty mills throughout the town. That kind of defines the town. From there, I was there a year. From there, I went to the Metro West Daily News in Framingham. Framingham's an interesting town. It's probably 70 or 80,000 people at this point. The north part of Framingham is very much like a suburb, like Sudbury. Like there's farms there, and it's very nice. And the southern part of Framingham is very urban. So stayed there for about 2 years, and then moved to New Bedford. Worked for the Standard Times in New Bedford. New Bedford's a great news town. There's a lot of crime. It's one of the biggest fishing ports in America, so that's like kind of that's the defining thing of the town. Obviously, it's where Moby Dick, originated and started. And from there, went to Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly, which is an industry publication in downtown Boston. Was only there for about 9 months. Decided I did not want to interview attorneys for the rest of my life. And from there, I went to grad school in London, City University in London, basically because I wasn't getting the journalism gigs that I wanted to, and I knew I had to do something to set myself apart from all the other journalists in Mass. The Globe was always the end goal for me. So yeah, I went to grad school in London, stayed there for a year, freelance for Vice for a couple of years, and bartended and just had a great time. And then from there, after my year in London, I moved to Bermuda, worked for a paper in Bermuda, and then moved home. And I've been at the Globe 8 years now. So that's the 90-second version.
Okay. And of course, we don't have 17 days to go through each story.
Yeah.
So I like the way you summed that up. But not to dwell on or speak on every story, because obviously, like you said, in that town, like you said, you didn't want to interview lawyers of all time.
Yeah.
Now, which town was that?
Well, that was for Massachusetts Lawyers Weekly, so that's in downtown Boston.
Okay, so
it was on Milk Street. I don't know if it's still there.
So,
but it's like the industry publication for local lawyers in Mass, yeah.
So can you speak on just like a major story, like what was a big hit for you? You don't have to go back to the first newspaper, but like a story that you wrote that you felt like, okay, this is a nice pat on the back, like it was a big hit for you, and then you moved on to another bigger story, like, you could sum it up as, fast.
Well, I mean, in Bermuda was wild because, I grew up in Massachusetts. I was born in Brighton, and I went to high school in rural Worcester County. And Bermuda's, it's an obvious thing to say, but it is a different country. It's a totally different vibe. I remember living in Bermuda, and Bermudians are really friendly, and like it's the type of place where if you walk down the street, people will say good morning to you, even if they don't know you. New England is not like that. So my time in Bermuda was fascinating, and I wrote one story in Bermuda where basically it was a casino scandal involving the premier of the country, which is the head of the government. And basically there had been rumors that the premier of the country had met with a potential casino developer before the casino legislation had even passed. So there was a whole bunch of, my assignment was to figure out if they met, and if they did meet, what they talked about. And basically the casino developer was this American, his name was Nathan Landau. He's at the time this is obviously before Trump ran for president and became president, but at the time he was kind of like framed as like Washington DC's Donald Trump, like very brash, powerful, rich Washington DC residential developer, and he wanted to build a casino in Bermuda. And of course the flight logs of the planes are public record, so we could see that the premier's plane, his own personal plane, had flown into Nathan Landau's hangar in Maryland. And I basically did a simple search of all the LLCs, all the corporations that Landau owned, and he's a billionaire, so he had a lot of them. And I was just it's very tedious. It's not, a lot of people think journalism is glamorous, and a lot of times it's not. It's just like you're just doing this tedious stuff in the hopes of, getting something. And so probably about the fourth phone number, the fourth LLC that I called, Landau answered the phone. And we had an interview where, I asked him, so you met with the premier, and he said, yeah, I like Craig a lot, and I said, well, what did you talk about? And he said, well, we talked about a casino. So that alone, he just admitted, that alone was a huge story because, the fact that he was discussing casino development with the Bermudian premier when the casino legislation hadn't even been passed yet raises all sorts of red flags. And then I waited till the end of the interview. Sometimes I'll do this if I know that there's particularly tough questions where the interview subject could end the interview and kill the interview. I'll hold them until the last thing. So get everything else, get as much information as you can, and then hold the potentially nuclear questions till last. So the last question was basically like there was this rumor that he had wired a bunch of money to Bermuda, the developer, Landau did. So I said, I framed it as I just want you to be able to put these rumors to rest and clarify, did you send $300,000 to Bermuda? It was actually him and a consortium of businessmen, I should say. But the rumor was $300,000 that he had wired it. And he said, no, that's inaccurate. It was $330,000. Which is crazy.
So you pretty much got him on tape, so you're recording this conversation? Or you're just writing?
No, I'm taking notes. Well,
okay.
And sometimes I'll record conversations. This particular conversation I did not record.
Okay.
And so I asked him he framed it as a political contribution. So I asked him, what was the name of the account that you wired the money to? And he gave me the name of the account. So I wrote it down. And then I ended the interview, and then the very next call, I called the finance head of the party that the premier was part of, the political party. And I said, I have Nathan Landau on the record saying that him and a bunch of other American businessmen have wired $330,000 to this account. He says it was a political contribution. What do you say to that? And basically the finance guy said, I've never heard of that account in my life. So at that point, the premier was pretty much dead to rights, because what we have is an American billionaire businessman admitting to wanting to develop a casino in Bermuda. There's no casino those casinos were not legal at the time. So he's admitting to meeting with the Bermudian premier, discussing this, and then after that meeting, wiring $330,000 to this mystery account in Bermuda, which he thought was a political contribution, but the finance head of the political party is just saying that it's not. Obviously, there's a bunch of quid pro quo questions about this, right? And instead of answering those questions, the premier resigned. So we wrote the story. I think the story was published on a Friday, and the premier resigned on a Monday. So
you cost somebody their damn job, man, with your reporting.
How
does that make you feel, though? I mean, because I hate to backtrack or not to cut you off, but you said, it's tedious work, and a lot of people don't see when somebody's shooting in the gym, right? So everybody see you in the NBA, you made it. So that's what I call that. So you're doing all of this tedious work, you're doing all this research, you're making these phone calls, and now you see something that your hard work turned into a positive. Is that rewarding? Is that a championship? Or what?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, that's what you do it for, because and it's going to sound corny or over the top or whatever, but the function of journalists, we're supposed to be a counterbalance to people in power. That's what we're there for. Places where journalism is suppressed or doesn't exist, typically those aren't great places to live because power goes unchecked. So yeah, of course, you dream of taking out the head of a government. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't even know if you dream that. Like, I you know, it doesn't happen very often. So, so yeah, you know, it was a big victory for us. Unfortunately, a few weeks later, my paper, the paper in Bermuda that I was working for got bought out and dissolved. So we all lost our jobs. Yeah.
I wonder how that happened.
Yeah.
If you could go back and do the research, you'll figure that out.
I turned 30 as an unemployed journalist in paradise. Yeah.
Wow.
Because shortly after the paper got dissolved, I turned 30.
Okay, so something like that, and again, I know that there's success stories in every small climb, right? But that was a huge, success story. So after those small victories and working at these small newspapers, and you hit that jackpot like that, like that's literally, I would think, a journalist jackpot. Like you actually have somebody in a position of power. You write this story, and then the next business day, he's retiring. So, is that the end all to be all? Does that drive you to say, okay, I want more? Does that say, finally I made it and I'm okay, I could coast away? Like what?
No. Well, I mean, for me, there's always more stories. That's what really. I mean, getting back to one of your previous questions, you're like, well, when did you get interested in that? I guess I would say I've always been interested in stories. I love stories. I love people's stories. I think it's great. So like, there's always more stories. Like it's never ending. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was. It was a success, I suppose, but you move on to the next one, sort of thing.
Okay, so let's get off of the Bermuda. Yeah. And then your next step, was that Vice after that? Was Vice before
Vice was before that.
So Vice was before
Well, and also concurrently, because I was still doing freelance stuff for Vice while I was in Bermuda. So it was like, yeah.
Okay, so I was hearing about one of the stories you wrote for Vice, and was tracking us, drug dealers or some drug dealers. So that story was released in the States. Was that story released in?
Yeah, I mean it's both. So I wrote for the website when I was, Vice had offices throughout the world.
Okay.
So like they have an office in London. So when I was living in London and going to school in London, I was doing stuff.
You started working there, but then you moved back to the States.
Yeah.
So you still work for Vice and everything's online.
Yeah. I was freelance. I was never staff at Vice. I was always freelance. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So, and to the audience, because not everybody knows what freebasing is. No, I'm kidding. Freelancing. So you're writing stories.
You get paid per. You get paid per article. So you're not like on staff. So you don't get like a weekly salary. You get paid per article, basically.
And not every article you write and submit that they're going to accept and pay you for. Or like any article you submit, they're just going to say, okay, here's $5. I don't need the monetary value, but any article you work hard for and you submit.
I mean, well, yeah, you have to pitch it. You'd be like, hey, this is the story. Do you want it?
Oh, okay,
and then they say, yeah, we're interested, and then you talk price.
Oh, okay, so then you won't just sit out here and do all that dedication to write an article and then submit it. Oh, see, that's good to know, because I'm thinking...
Well, sometimes what I would do, I would finish the article, and I have it in the can, and then I would pitch it to them, and if they'd say no, I would just pitch it to another outlet.
Oh, okay.
So I would do that.
So then that's what freelancing is, you're not understand. Okay. So then you was in the States, now how did that story come about? Like, because I was reading one of your stories where you was able to actually... delve into the drug world, right? Like, so you were able to see the life of a drug dealer, right? Like, that's one of the stories. Is that on Vice online now? Is that?
Yeah. I mean, all the clips are on the website.
And what are some of those stories names, or like where they can go to, like if you can recall, or?
I mean, man, you're talking 10 years ago. So, like, I mean,
look up your name
Vice is, yeah. If you Google Danny McDonald Vice, it should pop up.
Okay.
So, like, Vice is, like, one of their things is, like, they're really interested in the drug trade, both in a local sense and an international sense. And I've always been interested in crime reporting, I guess in a macro sense, in that I like kind of examining how crime happens and why it happens, and like the systems of crime. Like individual crime cases don't really interest me that much. It's more the systemic stuff that leads to crime that's really interesting. because in a lot of ways, like crime is like the end product of like a whole bunch of societal failures, right? Like you know what I mean? Like, so that stuff interests me. So like part of that is drug trade, you know. I found that stuff to be fascinating. Yeah, really interesting.
What piques that interest with, I guess, the drug trade? So, like, you know, you got thousands of stories, you got thousands of lives, you have racism, you have the sex trade, you have just different stories along the lines. Like,
yeah. I mean, I think all that stuff's interesting. Just in terms of the drug trade, I mean, it's just, I think any sort of underworld or subculture is interesting, and how stuff works, right? Because in a lot of ways, like the drug trade is what happens when society fails people, right? So like people that are selling fentanyl and mass and cas, you know, they've been failed by our education system, our economy, you know, their church, if that's a thing, you know what I mean? Their family in a lot of ways. Like it's just like kind of the end product of a whole bunch of social failures.
what about devil's advocates that say, no, these people chose to get into the drug trade?
Yeah, I
These
mean,
people chose
everyone
to-
has choice. There's always choices. But, you know, I think if you go out in mass and cas, you're not going to find a lot of kids born of wealthy parents whose, you know, parents are doctors or lawyers who are selling fentanyl in the Ave. You know what I mean?
In a way,
I'm just saying, like,
oh, but
like-
probably selling it is probably different. Using
Yeah.
it is two
Yeah,
different
right,
stories.
right.
But you'll be, I don't know. I think you'll be surprised nowadays. Maybe in the past, just real quick. I think that some people are actually fascinated with certain lifestyles, right?
Yeah,
and
for
you'll
sure.
be surprised at how somebody can sit in their mansion and
Yeah.
say, "This is intriguing to me, and I want to be a part of that." Right?
Yeah.
Like, so
Yeah.
I'm not saying that's the majority, or
Yeah, everyone's got
It's-
choice.
yeah,
Everyone's
yeah,
got
it's-
choice.
it's-
100%. And I mean, there's a long history of, actually in this town in Boston, of, you know, you look at the Bulges, right? Whitey was a criminal kingpin. His brother Billy
It's, you know,
went to law school, was a state senate president.
Right,
You know what I mean?
right.
And there's other examples of that. I mean, our current Attorney General, Andrea
Great
Campbell.
example. Great example.
Yeah, you know, she's the top law enforcement official in Massachusetts right now, and you know, both of her brothers have had extensive run-ins with the law. So I mean, so there's always, you know, and you know, and you know, the AG has talked extensively about what she think has led her that way, and her brothers on another path. But you know, I guess the point is that yes, there's always choice.
Yeah, everybody has an opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got something.
Sure. So, is there a story that another journalist actually wrote that you wish was your story?
Yeah. I mean, you know, probably my favorite American journalist right now, working American journalist right now, is Patrick Radden Keefe. He's actually a Dorchester boy. He's from Dorchester. He writes for the New Yorker. I read everything he writes, and he wrote a book about the troubles in Northern Ireland called "Say Nothing." And just growing up, being of Irish descent in Massachusetts, in Greater Boston, you know, the troubles were of intense interest to me. So something like that, like it's amazing journalism. And yeah, I mean, I wish I wrote that. Yeah. So yeah. He's written other books too. He's written The Empire of Pain, which is about the opioid crisis, and he writes for the New Yorker regularly. So all his stuff is really good.
So when I think about the series The Wire, and like you said, like you're a fan of The Wire, I think about McNulty, right? Like, so this is somebody that he appears to be an individual that being a cop was all he could do. Like, he is nothing without that badge and
Right.
shield, and he digs deep. So when you look at your life, do you feel like that's all you live, breathe, and eat? Like, are you the McNulty of like because
The McNulty minus the alcoholism.
but minus all the negative, minus all the negative. Make sure we put that out there. But like I think about how you were saying how tedious it is, and how much hard work you have to put in just to come up with a story, and to work for all of these different.
Yeah, I mean, look,
papers.
I think there's work to live people and live to work people, if that makes sense. I'm definitely a live to work person.
Okay.
Like the fact that I'm a journalist is the most defining characteristic of me, 100%. Now, I mean, I have hobbies, I read a lot, I go for runs, I'm super into soccer, all that stuff, but like none of that stuff is really defining as the fact that I'm a working journalist for me. Yeah. So I mean, journalism is my life. It is my life. Yeah.
So all of these stops, right? And you're writing different stories, different topics, different management, even freelancing. What is your pick of the litter? Like what really makes you say, okay, this is what the world wants to know about, or do you feel like this is what the world wants to know about, or this is what I want the world to know about?
I think it's probably more the latter. I mean, I've been doing this for 18 years now, and I feel like I know what a good story is. You know what I mean?
Is it just a good story, or is it a good story that you want people to know about?
Yeah, well, I think it can be both. You know what I mean? I don't think they're mutually exclusive. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it could be a good story, but like you could write a good story about a cat in a tree, right? So like, so it actually could be like. So I'm asking you to like really put yourself on that.
Not to get all ivory tower and philosophical, but like even that cat in a tree, like that's a little slice of reality, right? So it's like my job is to write about slices of reality. Like anything that is real is worthy of a story, in my opinion. You know
All right, don't take the political way. I mean, I don't want to do it like that. But I mean, obviously, like you said, you could write a great story about the cat in the tree. Facts. But what draws you to, okay, so I want to write this particular story because the world needs to know about it, or because it's a hunger in me that I just want to write this particular story. You're not fond of writing about cats and trees.
Yeah.
Not that there's not a subset of people out there that would love a great story about a cat in a tree.
Yeah.
So is it more?
I mean, yeah, you want your work to have impact, 100%. I mean, I write a lot about mass and cats, right? And the reason I write about mass and cats is that I think it's actually morally offensive that Boston's supposed to be the Athens of America, and yet this is the best that we can do. You know what I mean? Like, it's offensive to me that we haven't figured out a better way of caring for people than 200 people on Atkinson Street getting messed up every day. So when I write about mass and cats, I want people to grab people by the lapels and be like, look, this is happening in one of the richest cities in America. You know what I mean? Like, that's a problem. For me, that's a problem. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, it definitely. I think without you, I think you're being modest. You know what I'm saying? I think that you're really, and it's cool. Like you're the type of person that you don't want to pat yourself on the back, and I love that about you. You know, because I feel like I'm the same type of individual. I think that you want to write impactful stories. You know, like
of
course. That's
any
meaningful.
journalist does.
Yeah. But like I said, like no, some journalists want to get paid, right? Or some journalists want to get their names.
Well, they need to be working in PR or marketing if that's the case, you know.
But also, without even just the monetary value, like sometimes just a great story. Like I said, you could write a great story about a cat in a tree, and it could be on a New York Times bestseller. Wherever those stories go, Pulitzer prizes and all of that. We'll get into that in a few seconds, in a few minutes. But either way, no, I think that it's important for people to realize or know something deeper about you, and I think that's something that, again, you don't want to pat yourself on the back for, and I think that we should. I think that the community should, and like you said, you're writing about massive cats, so When you say that, have you already written 5 stories, 2 stories? Are those stories already out there? Are they on the Boston Globe website?
Yeah. So I did a big story I did was, and it's actually the premise of it was really simple. And it was 12 hours of mass and Cass, and this was, when was this? I think this was in 2021,
Okay.
and it was pretty bad out there. Like it was the tent encampments had grown. It was like we were still coming out of the pandemic. There was a mayoral change. Marty Walsh went to Washington to become U.S. Labor Secretary. Kim Janey was the acting mayor. And Mass and Cass just got crazy, really crazy. And like the encampment had spread to like multiple streets. It spread into Newmarket Square. And so like, I remember driving by it, and I was like, and I had been the crime reporter for the Globe for a couple of years, night crime reporter. So you go to all the homicides, you go to all the car crashes, you go to all the house fires, you see and report on some grisly stuff, some tough stuff. And I remember driving by Mass and Cass at that time, and I was like, this is the worst block in Boston. It looked like a refugee camp. This is crazy. And so my pitch was like, let's just do a day at Mass and Cass. And just literally just write what you see. You know what I mean? Like, and that's all I did. And it was, I think it was very impactful. I think frankly, I think it shook the city awake, and I think the city really kind of prompted some action and opened people's eyes. Because I mean, I went with part of the 12 hours. I had a very talented photographer with me, so his photos really kind of captured the vignettes of misery that were going on there 24/7 all the time. So it was a very evocative and effective piece, and I do think it affected real change in the city. I don't like giving myself any credit, but I do think that piece was kind of the definitive piece on Mass and Cass at the time, and really opened people's eyes to like, okay, this is unacceptable, sort of thing.
And do you recall the name of that?
It was just called 12 Hours of Mass and Cass.
12 Hours of Mass and Cass.
Yeah.
Look that up online, everybody, because this is reaching millions of people. We're not just Boston based, but definitely want y'all to check it out. We got some questions from the audience. The young lady over there in the black.
I was gonna say, because you're speaking about the Mass and Cass, for people that grew up here and knew what the area looked like prior to, these tents and everything, from you out interviewing and talking to the people out there, how did that even start, that particular area was chosen?
So there's a couple different factors. So Mass and Cass refers to the intersection of Massachusetts Avenue and Melnea Cass Boulevard, which is kind of near where in Boston, near where the neighborhoods of the South End, Roxbury, and Dorchester meet.
And prime example, Boston Medical Center.
Yeah. So
the biggest hospital.
Yeah. So and BMC has long been kind of this literally the city hospital, and offered a lot of social services. So there's been a lot of social services in this area for a very long time. There's multiple methadone clinics, there's multiple homeless shelters. So it's kind of this hub of social services for people who are homeless and people who are struggling with addiction. So there's that sort of aspect of it. The other thing is that the Long Island Bridge was closed down in 2014, I believe. Previously, the city had basically a homeless shelter and like a campus with some programming for folks out on Long Island, which is in Boston Harbor. You got to go through Quincy to get there. Basically, in 2014, the bridge to get to the island was so dilapidated they had to close it down. So all that programming stopped. So they stopped busing folks from the heart of Boston out there. People who live in the South End will tell you that after they stopped busing folks out to Long Island, that's, you started seeing a lot more of the crowds and a lot more of the violence and a lot more of the open air drug market of Mass and Cass sort of happening. So I think it's the two things. One, the area's been a hub of social services for folks who are struggling, and also the closure of the Long Island Bridge.
You ever been given an assignment you didn't want to take?
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah. Oh man, there's too many. I'm just trying to like think of one.
Well, something that you just was it because just morally or integrity you just like I can't do this or. Like,
I mean, it's like sometimes you need to fill up the paper, right? This was like more of a problem with the smaller community papers that I worked for. Like I remember one time I was working for Metro West Daily News in Framingham, and one of the high school musicals had just been released, and they sent me out to do like a man on the street asking people at a shopping mall about the new high school musical. And like I've never seen to this day I've never seen the High School Musical. I'm not really a musical guy. So I had to like stop strangers and be like, hey, what do you think about this? You know, yeah, that's
okay. So like that's just something like that's just kind of beneath you, but not so much where you felt morally bankrupt for having to have to do it.
well. I mean, any journalist who's done it for a while will tell you that. I shouldn't say any, but a lot of journalists who have done it for a while. You know, door knocking people after a homicide is atrocious. It's terrible. It does not leave you feeling good. You know what I mean? And I've had to do that, where it's like some kid gets killed, and you go to the mom's house, and then you're like, hey, you don't know me, and this is the worst day of your life, but tell me how, you know, little Tommy loved the Patriots so I can put it in the paper. I mean, that stuff is like, depending on how you look at it, I mean, it's, you can make an argument that it's morally indefensible. You know what I mean? I mean, I wouldn't talk to me in those circumstances. If that was me, you know what I mean, and my loved one had been fatally shot, I wouldn't talk to the press.
That people want to talk to you during that.
Sometimes it's cathartic. Yes, sometimes people want to talk because it's a catharsis. All the time.
To put the story out about their
Correct. Sometimes that happens. Much more often, in my experience, and also some reporters are really good at doing that interview.
Some assholes.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but like, you know, I'm told constantly that I sound and look like a cop. You know what I mean? So it's like, in that situation, no one wants to talk to the cop.
You definitely got a radio voice, I'll tell you that. You got a great voice for newspaper.
Yeah.
I have another question. Have you, since you've been since you've been covering crime, have you noticed the difference in how crime is? Meaning, with the kids, like, so I'm guessing you started, and there was one generation that was committing heinous crimes, and now there's another generation committing heinous crimes. Like,
Yeah.
can you like juxtapose the two?
Like the differences between the violence between the generations.
Yeah.
I mean, you hear that I hear that anecdotally. You do hear that anecdotally, like if you talk, because you know, I've interviewed a number of men who have done serious time for homicides and other things, and now they're older and they're back home. And the anecdote that you hear is like, oh, well, there's no rules in this younger generation. And like the younger generation is crazy. When they were coming up, like, okay, there was a way you did things, and there were things you did do and didn't do. So you do hear that anecdotally. One of the things that's interesting, and I actually didn't report this, a colleague of mine did, the average age of, and I'm going off the top of my head, so don't hold me to this, but I believe the average age of a shooter in Boston is 30. So it's actually, a lot of the shooters are older. It's actually not, because I think a lot of people assume that it's just kids being kids and being crazy and shooting each other. But when in actuality, most of the shooters are older, are adults.
Wow.
You know, so, yeah. So I don't know if does that answer your question at all?
Yeah, no, I was just kind of curious between, like, if there was a difference in the generations, especially with, you know, social media. I don't know if like these kids like to brag more. I see it like in the videos.
So one thing, the social media aspect, you do hear a lot about that where, and it sounds so dumb, and it is dumb, that like a lot of violence amongst the younger crowd of younger kids in Boston is
Recorded.
it's like social media is like gasoline on the fire, where it's like because the trash talk is public, people feel disrespected and they feel like they need to respond in a public way. That is a thing that a lot of people who work in those spaces, who work in anti-violence spaces in Boston will tell you that like there's been a lot of shootings, and again it just sounds so dumb where people are just literally jawing back and forth on, you know, Snapchat or Twitter or whatever, and then someone ends up getting shot because like, you know, someone gets disrespected. Like that is a thing that does happen.
And my last question, how do you convince people, well, what would your solution be to convince people to trust journalists again? Like, it's fake news is like a real thing. People don't believe you. And when I say you, like the real you, not you personally.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah, it's a good question. You know, all I can do is, and again, this is going to sound corny and ivory tower, but you know, I've dedicated my life to reporting the truth, and that's kind of all I can do. And I feel like,
Is that subjective? The word truth.
yeah, of course it can be. Yeah. But you want to get as close
Has
to.
it always been subjective?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, this is cliche, but car accident happens. There's 25 witnesses. You interview the 25 people, you're gonna get 25 different stories of what happened. You know what I mean? But for each of them, it's their truth. That's the truth. So yeah, I mean, the reason I do this is because I think that journalism is the backbone of any working democracy, and we serve the public. I'm here to serve the public. You know what I mean? The people of Boston and the people of New England deserve a paper that works as hard as they do, and that's what sort of drives me. And so that's all I can do is work hard, and all you can do is play straight and call like you see them, and be fair and respectful to people. It sounds corny, but I mean that's all I can do. I mean, in terms of, we do live in a media environment where people can kind of almost pick and choose the facts that they deserve to, or not deserve, but they believe, which is the problem. You know what I mean? Because the facts should be the facts. You shouldn't be able to choose your own facts. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's difficult, but you know, our job is to cut through the BS and try to present the news in a straightforward and understandable manner for people, because people's lives are hard enough as it is, and like they shouldn't be made harder by the paper, by the newspaper.
Well, to piggyback off of that, right, and going back to The Wire, if y'all don't know, that's one of my favorite series of all time. You know how there's a code of blue for police officers, right? You got dirty cops and bad cops. So I'm thinking about reporters, right? Like, or journalists, right? So, would they be considered the same, journalists and reporters, or should I?
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
You can use them interchangeably.
Okay,
That's fine.
okay.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure, because
Yeah.
somebody might say, "Oh no, that's one," just because I
Yeah.
don't know. Have you come across, like in The Wire, somebody that you felt was like manipulating stories, or you see people that try to do things for clickbait? Like, in other words, like I do this podcast, and like not that I'm doing this podcast, I'm not trying to set myself on fire. Like, I don't give a hell about trying to get, you know, a bunch of likes because I said something stupid on camera. Like, this is really an official podcast where I'm just speaking my truth, and I have guests up here that speaking their truth. Have you come across it in your work in history, or, and without saying names, obviously, because you're still in the industry, that you feel like there's reporters that do that, like that kind of every time something's going on or every time they write a story, it seems to always have like the rolling head in the story, or, you know, I happen to be at this corner at this type of time. Like,
Well, I think, look, there's a whole spectrum of journalists, right, and a whole spectrum of papers, and there's, you know, I've had stories that I wish I had back, You know what I mean? In terms of like, oh yeah. I mean, I think I've been doing this for 18 years. You know what I mean?
But when you say that, because you made a mistake, or because you intentionally did something just to write the story? Because that's what I guess I'm getting at.
No, more because I made a mistake, or because in hindsight I didn't have the context right, or my approach wasn't right, or I just missed the story. Like I was concentrating on this one thing, and really the story was the other thing. I mean, I think every journalist, in their heart of hearts, if they're being honest with you, will tell you.
Now that's understandable. That's you being honest with yourself about something that you failed at. Now I'm talking about intentionally saying, yeah, okay, this happened when you know good and damn well that didn't happen, and you want to promote your story a certain way.
Yeah, no,
Ryan Williams.
What?
Ryan Williams.
Oh yeah, with the like New Orleans stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who's Brian Williams.
He was the NBC anchor. He said he was in New Orleans. I think it was after Katrina. Was that right? And he saw bodies falling.
Okay, all right, that's all. I
Yeah.
thought it was some local. You talking about the big
I mean,
one? Okay.
You know, that's what I mean. All your training is to not do that.
You're training. Like,
Yeah.
You're trained to go to the cup, but sometimes you shoot the jumper. So like, what?
Yeah. No, I mean, whenever there's a big scandal about that, about like, you know, reporters making stuff up or whatever, I don't understand it, and here's why: because journalism is tough. It's a tough industry. The pay is not great, and it's like if you want to do that, just go work in PR. Like I don't understand why you would go through the rigmarole of trying to be an established journalist and then make stuff up. I don't get that.
You just answered the question to me. Okay, like you said, journalists don't pay a lot. But if I come across and I have the right story, again, The Wire. If I have
season 5 is my least favorite season of The Wire, for the record, for this reason.
But no, like I'm literally listening to you, and I'm like, you're answering your question and you're saying it to me, right? Like, because I'm like, okay, if I'm sitting up here and I'm doing these little shit show jobs, and I hate to keep using these bad words, and I have an opportunity to embellish truth, and it can get me to another realm. Somebody else might like it, or this is going to bring more attention to my story. Why would I not do it? So unintentionally, I understand that. That's a true artist. Like again, like you don't want to pat yourself on the back, but it comes across in the interview how true to the art form you are, right? But there are individuals out here, like you keep speaking on, like you're working in these, these newspapers or what have you, and it's not giving you, or you're not getting a lot of pay for what the hard work you're putting in. Why would you not embellish your story? Why would I not say that?
Well, it's a risk-reward thing. The risk is huge, because if you get caught, not only will you get fired, but you won't be able to get another job.
I'm only making $2 an hour, so I mean, like, what am I really losing? So in other words, the risk was, have you come across? No, I don't want to throw you in the. No, I would never. No,
I'll say this. To my knowledge, I don't think I've ever worked with somebody like a Jason Blair who has made stuff up out of whole cloth. I don't think I have.
Jason Blair, a lot of people I know.
Jason Blair was a reporter in the New York Times maybe 20 years ago, and he basically was just like fabricating stories, people quotes, just totally making stuff up.
See, this is
totally
crazy.
making stuff up.
Now, Jason Blair, y'all can Google that real quick. Let me ask you. Do you not understand why he did it?
Well, again, I'm just like, why go through the trouble of trying to be a journalist if you want to do that? Like, I don't get it. I honestly don't. Because he is not once he's caught, he was working with, in my opinion, the Times is arguably the best paper in the world. He was working for the best paper in the world.
The second best paper, because Boston always New York and Boston.
The why, and he threw it away because of that stuff. You know what I mean? Like he was at the mountaintop. He was on the mountaintop, and he threw it away.
Let me tell you something real quick before we go to the audience member. How you think he got to the mountaintop?
Yeah.
I'll just leave that there.
Yeah.
You think he did that the first time once he was at the mountaintop? That's how he got there. That's my opinion. But either way, I don't know what's his name, Jason Walsh?
Blair.
Jason Blair. Blair Witch Project. You're out of here. All right. Let's go over here to the other young lady over here in the green.
So this is my last question. So do you feel as a journalist that it's different in how you are able to do your job based on the media influence today? Where now stories are not just delivered by paper or what's on the news, but social media is now people faster are finding out information, whether they're getting a lot of facts, but they're getting information.
So yeah, that's a good question. The industry. So my first job was in 2006, right? And you know, the internet obviously existed then, but Twitter wasn't as much of a thing. Obviously, social media wasn't. Facebook existed, but it wasn't as much of a thing. Now it is the thing. And so, since that time, I've definitely seen the industry change, where it's like the focus used to be on 6 p.m. deadline for the paper product, but now it's digital first, right? So that means that I'll give you a perfect example. Today, I covered a press conference about Mass and Cast. The mayor was there. So we wrote a very quick, once the press conference was over, we wrote a very quick, short, 400-word story for online, just to get it up so people would know. Not quite in real time, but almost real time. And then once we posted that, I went back through, expanded upon the story, wrote like 900 words, kind of changed some stuff, made it more, writerly or whatever, and then we updated it. So the focus is, yes, definitely to get the news out. It's not, you can't be holding on to stuff till 6 p.m. anymore. That's not acceptable. You know what I mean? It's got you're writing for the web, because that's what you got to meet people where they're at. That's where people are at. So yeah.
To piggyback off of that, are you in fear of your job? Because I'm a journalist. You're a journalist. You're a reporter. Like now, all I have to do is pull up my camera and I'm recording. Like you said, I'm at the same event.
Yeah.
I'm recording everything, and now I'm sitting up and hey, look at me, look at what she just said. Like now it's so obviously they're outsourcing every damn thing. But like your industry is a lot different because it's practically being outsourced unintentionally. So do you think of that? Are you in fear of that thing? Are you working on
it's, listen,
writing a book instead of
I work for a newspaper in 2023, and it's definitely not a growth industry. But, the Globe
it's a strong
has, it's a strong identity, it's a strong brand.
We've been Mask Uncovered podcast.
We have more than 200,000 digital-only subscribers, so that's really good for a paper. I think the only papers that have higher than us are like the big boys, Nationals, which are Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, and the Times. So those are the only papers in America that have more digital-only subscribers than us, I believe. So, look, no one knows what the future will hold. The industry continues to face challenges. It's been gutted in recent years, basically because classified advertising has totally gone down because of the internet. Look, a lot of papers, a lot of smaller papers are, there's a question of whether they're viable. You know what I mean? And that's an open question. I'm lucky enough to work for a paper where we're on pretty solid financial footing. So, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we've held you up long enough, and hopefully people got to, know you and understand. Oh, well, shit. I would love to hear this.
Do you need to go to college to be a journalist?
So at one point you didn't. Like old school, like 70s, I think it was viewed much more as like a craft or
That's
in
what I'm
cause.
saying. Is it more for the craft or is it?
Nowadays, I think you would be hard pressed. I mean, obviously, there's always exceptions, but if you don't have a college degree, I don't think you need to necessarily study journalism in college. But I do think if you want to be successful at a reputable outlet, and nowadays you need a college degree. Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how well I can write. Like I just.
I mean, again, there are exceptions to everything, but I think it would be tough. It would be tough. Just because the job market, because everyone else has a college degree.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. So all right. Better question. If I study what do you learn by studying journalism in university?
So you learn a bunch of stuff. You learn. So first of all, you get reps. You do the practical. You write stories. You start to understand the basics of straight news stories. The who, what, where, when, why stuff. So you get reps in that respect. You also study a lot of the theory as to why we're doing this, like why journalism exists and what service we should, give the public, and also a lot of the ethics stuff. So we were talking about some of the ethics, like why you should make stuff up. So you go through that as well. A lot of it, honestly, is kind of studying existing journalism and seeing what has worked and what has been successful. A lot of it's that.
I feel like I don't need to go to college for that.
I mean, you don't need to go to college. A lot of
We
it.
just learned.
You learn on the job.
Yeah, well, it's not. It is a thing that like nothing can replace real world experience in this. So yes, like there's stuff that you will encounter in your day to day that you can't be prepared for, like knocking on a door of a mom whose son was just killed. Like there's no way that any university course can prepare you for that, right? You just gotta learn how to do that. Yeah.
No, I love the game, man. Like, and I think there's a lot of professions that no matter what you got your degree in, a lot of these corporations just want to see that you have a degree. You have the ability to learn and adhere to what they're teaching. And then some of these corporations, like you said, if you're a nice writer, you come in with the right specifics, then maybe you'll rise right to the top. But definitely, man, Danny, I want to thank you for spending this time with Master Uncovered Podcast, man. I think you shared a lot.
Thanks for having me, man.
We'd definitely love to have you back here. We want to say thank you to the guests out here, all the thousands of people out here. I was supposed to hit my little. I was supposed to hit my. I've been waiting to do that all night. But again, thank you again, man. Appreciate everything. Yo, Master Covered Podcast. Oh, can anybody reach you anywhere or should?
You read me in the Globe. If you Google Danny McDonald, it's McDonald MC, Boston Globe. My stuff will come up. I'm on Twitter, Danny_McDonald. I don't tweet a lot actually, but yeah, you can reach me there.
And definitely Master Uncovered Podcast on everything. Like, subscribe, and share. Tell a friend and tell a friend. I see our subscribers are growing. We love it. Thank you for the participation. But shout out, man, everybody, man. Thank you. Love y'all. Peace. Good night.